if you wish to not be recorded, you can turn off your video and your audio. So the meeting is being recorded, and we do plan on posting this video publicly in the future.
Oh, I'm going to turn off the dryer.
The thing behind me is my pet.
Okay. Is it a beagle?
I don't think so.
So it's up to you when to start. I'm completely out.
All right, I figure we'll give people another 30 seconds or so to come on before we start prayers. All right, so I'll go ahead and start the prayers if you're ready, Elizabeth.
I can't see anything at the moment.
Yeah, I'm going to start them in a minute.
Okay, sure. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for showing up this morning. And we're going to start with praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. Teacher, foe destroyer, thus gone, fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, gone to bliss, knower of the world, helmsman of ordinary beings to be tamed, supreme one, teacher of all gods and men, Buddha, foe destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offering, and go for refuge. Teacher, foe destroyer, thus gone, fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, gone to bliss, knower of the world, helmsman of ordinary beings to be tamed, supreme one, teacher of all gods and men, Buddha, foe destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offerings, and go for refuge. Teacher, foe destroyer, thus gone, fully and perfectly awakened Buddha, endowed with knowledge and good conduct, gone to bliss, knower of the world, helmsman of ordinary beings to be tamed, supreme one, teacher of all gods and men, Buddha, foe destroyer, glorious victorious one, Shakyamuni, to you I pay homage, make offerings, and go for refuge. When you, chief of humans, were born, you took 7 steps on this great earth, and you said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise at that time, I prostrate. Completely pure body, supremely fine form, ocean of wisdom like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, supreme protector, to you I prostrate. Endowed with supreme marks, a face like a stainless moon, a color like gold, to you I pay homage. The 3 worlds are not like you, who is free from dust. Matchless one, endowed with knowledge, to you I prostrate. Protector, endowed with great compassion. Omniscient teacher, field of ocean-like merits and good qualities. To the thus gone, I prostrate. Through purity, free from attachment, through virtue, releases from the evil-gone realms, unique, supreme, ultimate meaning. To the Dharma that brings peace, I prostrate. From freedom, teaching the path, well abiding in the pure trainings, holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha, also I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3, ever devout, homage. To all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atoms in all aspects with supreme faith, I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous action. Accumulate virtue and goodness. Subdue your own mind. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Like a star, a mirage, a lamp, illusions, drops of dew, bubbles, dreams, lightning, and clouds. Look at all conditioned phenomena as such. Due to this merit, having attained the state of the all-seeing and thereby subduing the enemy of faults, may I liberate migrators from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. I take refuge in the Guru. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Guru. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Guru. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the positive potential I create by listening to the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the joyful happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from holding some close and others distant. Respectfully, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I confess all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the virtuous actions of all ordinary and noble beings. Please, Buddha, remind us as our guide and remain as our guide and turn the wheel of Dharma until samsara ends. Through the merit created by myself and others, may the two bodhicittas ripen and may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. This offering I make of a precious jeweled mandala, together with other offerings and wealth and the virtues we have collected throughout the 3 times with our body, speech, and mind. O my masters, my yidams, and the 3 precious jewels, I offer all to you with unwavering faith. Accepting these out of your boundless compassion, please send forth waves of your blessings. Idam, Guru Ratnam, Mandalakam, Niryatam. The heart of the perfection of wisdom. I prostrate to the Arya triple gem. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on the massive vulture's mountain on Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, and not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no I element, and so on and up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on and up to and including no aging and death and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. A Buddha who dwells in the three times also manifestly completely awakened to unsurpassable perfection, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as the truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. Tayata, gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisoha. We'll say this silently for 21 times. Tayata, gate, gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhisoha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, Asuras, and Gandharvas, who were overjoyed and highly praised. That's spoken by the Bhagavan.
Okay, just a brief reminder, we are still recording this session, so if you choose not to be recorded, you can turn off your video and your microphone and still participate. Or you could choose to leave the session. I think we're going to start with Susan. We do have 4 of us presenting today, and Susan's going to explain sort of what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn it over to Susan.
Okay. Sound coming through okay? Yeah, all right. So today's talk is going to be a little unusual in that you're going to hear from 4 different people. 3 of us are Lama Jimpa's students, me, Susan Farrar, and Ellen Wolfe, and Conor McCann. And we're also fortunate to be joined with Jim Hare, who is a Zen priest and the head of practice at the Valley Streams Zen Sangha. So we 4 attended a 9-day retreat about a month ago that consisted of 30 some odd hours of lectures from an internationally highly esteemed Buddhist philosopher, scholar, writer, Professor J. Garfield. And what we're going to do is we're each going to share a little bit of our takeaways from these many, many hours of lectures, our experiences, and the effect that these lectures may have had on our practice and on our activities. So this retreat was sponsored by Sravasti Abbey, and it was called Emptiness and the Mind Perceiving It. Ellen and I had actually planned to go to the Abbey to attend this retreat in person, but it ended up being held online, of course, due to the shelter-in-place policies. But since the Abbey did host this online, many more people were able to attend this retreat, including Conor and Jim. And I think that I speak for all of us that we feel really, really fortunate and blessed to have had the opportunity to attend these lectures live. They are available on YouTube. And Conor, were you going to put something in the chat box about that? Yeah, okay. Conor's going to put something in the chat box about how to access these lectures on YouTube. Now, I'm not really going to talk about the Garfield lectures per se. What I am going to talk about is what these lectures reignited in me. And what that was a renewed dedication to practice, and maybe even, I might say, a longing towards needing to do some retreat. I'm going to talk about how this retreat showed me, yet again, the importance of study and how important study is in my life and in my practice. So there's this really famous and probably fairly often heard quote from Japanese Zen ancestor Eihei Dogen, who was the 13th century founder of the Soto Zen school of Buddhism. And the quote goes like this: "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things." So this series of lectures by Dr. Garfield provided to me yet another avenue, pointed me in another direction of ways that I can deepen my study and practice of learning how to forget the self. So my experience of studying and my experience being a Buddhist practitioner has indeed been primarily, as probably for all of us, a study of myself. And while I have yet to forget the self, I have become, over the years, more responsible, more content, more free of emotional upheavals and confusion and unhappiness than any other time in my life. So there's this three-stage process that we all know: study, contemplate, meditate. And the point is that it all starts with studying. It all starts, whether or not we're listening or we're reading, it all starts with studying. So just a couple of personal examples of what studying does for me, anyway. In April, and I'm probably not alone in this experience, but in April, I was really struggling with all of the stay-at-home, shelter-in-place stuff. I was getting lonely, and I was feeling tremendous loss and separation. And I know from past experiences that the only way to get out of this funk is to really apply myself, and through my own efforts, really dig into the Dharma. I know from past experiences, this is what works for me. So about that time, I got an announcement from Sravasti Abbey that Venerable Chodron was going to be giving some talks on a text called Parting from the Four Attachments. And as I listened to these talks, it brought me right back to the basics, right? I saw for the umpteenth time that life is precious. Death is all around us. There's pain, there's pleasure, there's gain, there's loss, there's recognition and obscurity. And those were the two that I was really, really working with. So, back to basics, Susan. Let's forget the self. this constant focus on me and mine, and recognize that samsara is untrustworthy, unpredictable, cannot be relied upon. And the most important thing is that everybody is in the same boat. So this, coming back to hearing these lectures and coming back to basics, is that this whole sense of separation is false. It's not true. It's a lie. It's a fiction that is told to me by my misperceived self. It's not true. And so what got covered up, what got buried, really became obvious again to me through listening to these teachings and, of course, thinking about them and meditating on them. Every time I listen to these teachings, and I've done it over and over again, it gets a little deeper. It permeates a little more into my bone marrow. And the truth arises more easily, and my confusion disperses more quickly. Another example, in May, I was relearning some stuff that I thought I already knew. Through a series of questions that were posed by Lama Jimpa, I did some study and some writing on shamatha, basic calm abiding meditation. And I got to say that I was shocked and really humbled by my lack of knowledge. Just like what I thought I knew, I didn't know. But the big point was that I was uplifted by the study. I was uplifted by becoming familiar again with how to practice shamatha. It just gave me a tremendous boost. I was inspired to practice more with more diligence, more determination. Because through studying, I got a much better, clearer picture of what to do and how to do it. So coming now to the J. Garfield lectures, I don't claim to have anything approaching a full understanding of what he was talking about. I mean, these were very, very deep, wonderful, fabulous lectures on emptiness and the Yogacara school of viewing emptiness. But what I did come away with was like a flash, a spark, something that really is going to allow me to start to investigate, to start exploring. What he did is he opened up a door to another really, really helpful way of understanding the self. And so what I'm going to be able to do with these lectures is it's going to be a springboard for investigation, a springboard for more studying, a springboard for what I hope is going to be a series of some personal retreats. I'm going to find a new way of approaching how I do these thought processes that create my so-called reality. Another way of discovering the self, another way of understanding my misperceived self and my misperceived sense of reality. So I'm just sort of on the tip of discovering, but that's what those lectures did for me. It's going to reignite my enthusiasm and my determination for studying and thinking and meditating. So next up is, I believe, Ellen is going to talk about her experiences with these lectures.
Thank you, Susan. I don't know if we want to take questions in between. Certainly, it's informal enough that if somebody's got a question that's real specific to something Susan said, you could either pipe up or type it into the chat, and we'll make sure we get back to you if we don't stop now for those. But I appreciate the chance to share on this topic, and I like that I got to go after Susan, because when I heard what she was going to talk about, her little synopsis was something like what I got out of the retreat. And almost what I get out of retreats in general was how I interpreted it. And I was excited to talk about that myself. I know I told Conor that if this day was going to be about trying to convey the content, the Yogacara that I was going to run in the other direction as fast as I possibly could. One of the things that I got out of the retreat was, wow, how much differently you can learn something if you spend that much time with it, with a really qualified teacher who's got his time dedicated there to help you. So that was really amazing, but it's something that's, I'd say, almost virtually impossible to recreate otherwise, to recreate that experience of dwelling. So I think it's healthy that we're not going to try to convey the content per se. And one of the things that I've loved about doing retreats like this, and I've only probably done this a few times, where I carve out 5 days, 7 days, in this case, 9 days of my life to dwell in this space, is something for me usually happens. And it doesn't happen necessarily during the time that I'm listening to the lecture, during the time that I'm sitting somewhere. It happens adjunct to it, either, you know, in the evening afterwards or the few days after. So, and one of these, and to me, it's almost like a magic that happens, but you can kind of connect it in some way to some things that took place during the retreat. So I have a couple pictures. I wanted to try to share my screen and see if I can share these pictures with you. And this is going to hopefully exemplify one of the things that I got and convey my appreciation for it. Let's see. Can do this. Okay, can you see that picture? Or somebody tell me if you can't see that picture. Okay, I don't hear anybody talking. So, yeah, okay. So if you can't tell what this is just a picture of some rocks on my deck. And the way this came to happen is Conor organized a little web meeting for the 4 of us to talk about the possibility of having a discussion and just to really debrief from the retreat. And I was catching up on chores, having played hooky for those 9 days, and I was shoveling about a ton of rocks out of a pickup truck into this area in my backyard. And so I was dwelling in rocks that day. And so hopefully you can recognize these as rocks. And I'm going to show you another picture now. So you probably are muted, but just you can, maybe you see something in the rocks as they're organized this way. And if you do, maybe you can chat it into the chat box. And I'm not, the way I'm showing my screen right now, I'm not seeing the chat box or seeing what you're saying. Just in case there's anybody that doesn't see something in these rocks, here's what I saw in these rocks. And in particular, the one in the middle really jumped out at me. But what was amazing to me that day when I was shoveling these rocks a day or two after the retreat is that I really love finding rocks that are shaped like hearts. And especially this one in the middle jumped out at me. And I don't usually find them. And it was amazing. I just kept finding rocks that were shaped like hearts. Let's see, have I stopped sharing or am I still sharing? Okay, good, I've stopped sharing. All right, so the amazing thing for me one of the amazing things after that retreat was that all my rocks, or not all, but 5 in this case, started showing up as heart rocks. It's like I love heart rocks, and my rocks look like hearts. And I was doing this heavy lifting experience, and yet life was showing up for me differently. And that was kind of one of the, I think, opportunities about studying Yogacara, is that how much we impute on life that things mean what they mean, and we don't even realize that we're doing it. And just for me, one of the magical qualities of the Buddhist practice, especially when you put together the study and the meditation and compassion, is that life shows up differently. You know, my life now is showing up differently after that retreat. And sometimes, you know, you get a crescendo and then it'll fade back down. But just one of the joys of it is that the recognition of how much I cause my life to show up the way it shows up, and how I have, in some sense, some control over that either in the way that I interpret things, or would I notice how I'm interpreting them and I can stop the cycles in my mind. For example, sometimes when I'm shoveling a ton of rocks, it feels really hard. And the conversation in my head is, this is hard, these are dirty, why are they so heavy? They're very loud, this shovel against the truck, et cetera, et cetera. But this time I'm shoveling rocks and I'm, wow, here's a rock that's shaped like a heart. Well, here's another rock that's shaped like a heart. Wow, isn't this fantastic? That I have the opportunity even to change through the conversation I'm having about my experience too, that sort of karmic path and the karmic memory in my body. And so one of the things that I loved about studying in those days is learning more about Yogacara's perspective on our deep consciousness and how we influence that with the seeds of karma, with things that we're doing and saying and maybe not even very present to. So that's what I wanted to share about my experience with the retreat. And I think I'll pass the baton and we can certainly come back for questions. We did get a question. Maybe I'll address this while it's here. Well, what is Yogacara? Yogacara is a philosophical school of Buddhism that has to do with the Buddhist philosophy and what a self is and what objects are. And it's probably a label. I'm certainly no expert, but as Professor Garfield told us, a lot of these classifications and labeling came after the fact of the Buddhists or philosophers that initially wrote some early tenets or early sutras, for example, about these different ways of looking at self and other. So Yogacara is a category of kind of a characterization system. Okay, Connor, maybe that's a good segue.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. So what I'm going to say is really about my experience. I haven't been studying Buddhism for very long, but I have double-checked the substantive part of what I'm going to say with Lamala, mostly for clarity and accuracy. But anything that does come out of my mouth incorrectly is really my own fault, and I apologize for anything that does come out incorrectly. But the 9-day retreat that we did do with Jay Garfield was studying Yogacara, which, like Ellen just said, it's one of the schools of Tibetan Buddhism, and it did emerge over time through different teachers and debaters, and it's basically different Buddhist philosophers who held similar views over time. And over time, these views changed and they morphed and they splintered, and this sort of similar flow got a label. That label was Yogacara, and this sort of flow of views and this labeling happens all over the world. It happens in Western philosophy and theologies all over the place. Well, the view that we hold here at Lion's Roar is Madhyamaka, and similar. Just over time, these views have emerged, over hundreds of years, and come together through a series of different philosophers and debaters and logicians and teachers. And within Madhyamaka, just as Yogacara, there's different subcategories. And right now, I'm just sort of going to gloss over all those different subcategories because they're not really important to what I have to say. But when studying Yogacara with Professor Garfield, for those of us who had never studied it before, there's sort of a perspective shift that we had to go through. It was really interesting to see, especially some of the nuns at Sravasti Abbey had a really hard time with this. It was really sort of challenging for some of them. And for me, that perspective shift in and of itself wasn't actually that difficult, but it really pointed out some of the things that I didn't realize within my original position, within the Madhyamaka point of view. So what do I mean by this perspective shift? Well, both Madhyamaka and Yogacara are, in all of Buddhism, search for shunyata, emptiness, non-dual awareness. But how these two schools go about that are different. There's sort of a different perspective. There's a different way to come to the same thing. Jay Garfield liked to say, there's two ways to get to Chicago. You can go from the east, you can go from the west. There's also the south and north. There's a whole different ways to get to the same place. So the Madhyamaka analysis, well, they're also looking for the self, they also looked at objects. And so they start that analysis from the perspective of objects. So what is the table? What are the parts of the table? What's the whole of the table? You know, what is a table? What is table as the category? And that's different from what is a table. And the punchline to the whole Madhyamaka point of view is that everything is empty of inherent existence. We get this from Tsongkhapa and Nagarjuna and Chantakirti, and all these great philosophers, all these great teachers have come together, and this is sort of the perspective that we have. Yogacara analyzes from the point of the mind. Sometimes it's called the mind-only school. J. Garfield was really clear that it's not that the mind is the only thing, it's that the mind is the only problem. And J. Garfield really looked at Yogacara from the phenomenological point of view. There's a whole bunch of, like I said, all these little subcategories that you could look at. And he was really teaching from the phenomenological, the experiential point of view. So the questions that I can come up with are, what is my mind like to be able to experience this hard, flat, raised object, i.e. a table? You know, how does it come to my mind? What is the experience? So Yogacara has a slightly different explanation, which I can best sum up, and I'm going to use my own words here, is to unglue my perspective, all right, from the external world. And the Yogacara technical term would be the imagined nature, which leaves the external world free from your influences. And that's not really easy to do. It's actually really difficult to spot what your experiences are and what your perspective is and how that influences the external world. There's a whole sort of second part to this analysis that I don't actually understand very well, so I'm not going to go into it. But it sort of leaves you with a reason to study Yogacara on your own. But here's the really fun part about this 9-day study for me, was that I spent sort of a week preparing for this course because I didn't know it was going to be online. I didn't know I was going to have this opportunity to take it. And then 9 days studying this material with a great teacher and just being bombarded with all this information that was new, and it was a different perspective, and it was a different way of thinking about things. And I learned a lot, and I learned what I don't know, which is actually more amazing sometimes. Sometimes it's really great to learn something. It's really great to learn that 2 + 2 = 4, but it's also really great to learn that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 3, right? Sometimes knowing what you don't know is also important. And there's so many fine details and fine and beautiful arguments that Jay was able to just sort of pull out because he knows Tsongkhapa. He really studies Tsongkhapa. He actually translated the text that Lamala had us read for the Buddha Dharma program on Tsongkhapa, right? So he knows this material really well. And it made me realize that having just read that text once and gone over it a little bit wasn't nearly enough. And that I missed so much, and that there's so much more to that material that I can gain by going over it again and again and again. And there's really a lifetime's worth of material there. And it's just an amazing work of logic and philosophy that's really withstood the test of time. And it was an amazing 9 days to just be inundated with new things and to have gained tremendously from all this wonderful stuff that I can carry on through the future. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually rereading Ocean of Reasoning, which is Tsongkhapa's text, and there's commentary on Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. I mean, those are the two first texts that Lamala had us read for the Buddha Dharma study program. So that was really one of my main takeaways, was that just studying this material and these texts once isn't enough. And we can gain so much more by going back over it. and hearing it again and again and reading it again and again and thinking about it over and over again, because we can grab it, but we don't necessarily have it. We don't necessarily have a good hold on it, and maybe that's sort of the point, is not to hold on to it, but to keep touching it and keep a hand on it and to keep looking back at it. So that's what I got, and I really appreciated that time. So if you have the opportunity to go back and to go for the first time and listen to his lectures, I would highly recommend it. It's well worth your time and effort. So I'm gonna pass the baton on to Jim. Thank you.
Good morning. Well, I'll start with a short, very short Zen story. There was an interaction between a teacher and his student, and the student asked the teacher, after the student was about to leave his teacher and go on to study with some other teachers, and he didn't know if he would get back to see his teacher. This was in ancient China, and so he said, after some time, and people ask me about you, teacher. How should I portray? He said, how should I portray your likeness? In other words, how should I remember you to other people? And the teacher said simply, just this person. Just this person. So, this is, I think this is a very good, sort of representation of the Yogacara perspective. And one of the sort of major insights that was offered in this retreat was that Yogacara is a school that studies emptiness from the side of the subject, from the side of, just this person. And Madhyamaka is a school that studies emptiness from the side of objective reality, from the side of the object. So this is the reference that Conor made to taking the train from New York to Chicago, taking the train from Seattle to Chicago. One being the Yogacara from the perspective of emptiness from the side of the subject, Madhyamaka, emptiness from the side of the object, both arriving at a very same place. This just this person is very similar to what Susan, in quoting Dogen, said. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. So this kind of the feeling, or the main emphasis of the Yogacara school, is to understand, deeply understand the nature of our consciousness and how it shows us reality, and understand that consciousness is showing us reality, and not to confuse that showing with reality itself. To be very aware that the structure of my consciousness structures my understanding, my relationships with other people, my relationship with myself, and implicit in that is an understanding that the way my consciousness shows reality to me is inaccurate, deceptive, and I need to be very careful about taking my perception as true a true representation, a true representation of reality. I need to be very careful about that. And one of the ways that I can be careful about that is by checking out my reality with other people, my perceptions with other people. Like if I have some perception about you, I might say, I have this perception about you. Is that true? And the other, important way, of course, of checking our perception is through introspective meditation. The longer one practices, the more one realizes how deeply embedded our biases, our deeply ingrained beliefs are there, because there's so much, when something is so close to you, so much a part of you, it's hard to see that it's hard to see it. It's like when something's really, really close to you, you can't really see it. It's like right in your face, and it's so close that you can't see it. And it's kind of the impression that I got from understanding that these structures of consciousness are so deeply ingrained that they're very difficult to see, and that's why we do our meditation practice. So our meditation practice, one of the functions of ordinary awareness is to objectify reality. In other words, to actually the definition of consciousness is that we see an object. That's the definition of consciousness, the seeing of an object. And our meditation practice is repeatedly, over and over and over again, letting go of the object. And the more we do meditation practice that lets go of the object, that is the function of consciousness to see, a different reality can then begin to appear to us, a different understanding. One of the phrases that J. Garfield used several times was something like, you don't know if you're seeing reality through a telescope or a kaleidoscope. And I thought that was a very helpful image for me, because I think that what I think ordinary consciousness does oftentimes is it makes us see, or it has us see, through a telescope, very narrowly based on deeply embedded conscious structures. And I think this is, and so our meditation practice is, I don't know if meditation practice is developing what I would call, I've never thought of calling it a more kaleidoscopic awareness, but I think it is a practice that lets us see more points of view. And if that's what he means by kaleidoscope, then that's the way I would understand it, as not just one narrow, fixed, objective reality that I take for true, but actually multiple points of view on reality, multiple possibility. And this brings to mind, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. That's the famous saying from Suzuki Roshi in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. So that's like the telescope versus the kaleidoscope. And I think, we had one session that was very powerful in the workshop. There was an editorial written in the New York Times by a philosopher named George Yancey, who is African American. And the editorial came out at the time that Ahmaud Arbery was killed in Georgia by 3 white men while he was jogging. And it was a very powerful editorial. But it linked really to our study, because it has to do with these deeply embedded structures of consciousness. Like, I think I'm a white person, right? I have a structure of consciousness based on the fact that I'm white, and it's so close to me that I don't see it. I don't see how that structures my consciousness. I have a structure of consciousness that I'm a man, and it's so close to me, I don't see how that controls my perspective. So these deeply, structural biases that we have are very much a part of this examination that is done by examining these structures, letting these structures really come into consciousness in meditation, and understanding that they're deceptive in that they're partial, because I'm a white person, but what am I really? I'm a human being. I'm a human being with a white skin, with a certain consciousness. But I need to understand how whiteness creates a telescope. What is the white telescope? And this is obviously where I'm bringing this up. I think you all know why I'm bringing this forward right now, because of the moment that we're in, where people are really showing us so clearly how we really need to take another look and another look and another look at these deeply embedded structures of consciousness that are perpetuating racism, that are perpetuating violence, that are perpetuating poverty, and all of the ills, the homelessness. I mean, it's a greatly connected web, and we need to be looking at that kind of bias. And so this workshop, it got really real when the nuns actually asked Jay Garfield to read this whole editorial, which is, I'm sure you can go find it, written by the philosopher George Yancey in the New York Times sometime in May. And it was hard hitting. It was hard. It was actually, he was a little reluctant to read it because it was pretty graphic in a couple of instances. So I will give you that warning if you want to go look for it, that there are some graphic images and stories in that editorial. But it really connected this teaching to our social situation. And it's not, it is a spiritual endeavor. I mean, to do this kind of analysis is definitely a spiritual endeavor, but it definitely also connects to our vow to liberate, to act for the benefit of all beings. It connects so strongly to that. So from that point of view, it really connects to our practice, and it connects our practice with the world. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim. I did post the link to that article, and the article does have fairly graphic images on it, just to warn you if you have not already clicked on it. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, let's open this up for questions. Comments.
I think also there were others in this cohort here that participated either partially or fully in listening to the Jay Garfield talks, either through the kind of more live version or through following them on YouTube. So we don't want to exclude people either. If others had different experiences they'd like to share, I think we should, we'd like to hear those as well.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
I've only looked at the view.
Elizabeth, can you say it again? You kind of broke up there a little bit.
Yeah, Elizabeth, we seem to have lost you. You're frozen. While we're waiting for Elizabeth's connection to improve, is there anybody else who has something to say? Robert, I can see you.
Hi, I have a comment.
I thought
Can you
you
hear
might
me?
see you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. I think about this analogy they make about going to Chicago, it make me think of a lot of things. And then this the thing we just heard about the structure of how we perceive things and how we don't see the structure, and make me think like as a Western mind, we are all trained to think about destination. So if I have to study how to achieve emptiness and how I start and what's the route and how I get there, and then the thing like I want to go to Chicago and there is more than one road to go there, and what's the best road. So and then I have this moment that I say, well, I am in Chicago. Sometimes it's like the journey. We are trained to see destination, how the movie gonna end, right? We gonna see it's gonna be a happy end or a bad end, but how the movie ends, and in some kind of perspective, is really about the journey. So it's not emptiness is here now. Even if I want to get there, it's also here at the same time. So the journey and the destination, but the destination kind of trick our mind, I think. Even I do have I have no doubt I have the beginner's mind because I don't study much, I don't meditate enough or much, but I have this. I try in my daily life to jump in the moment. Like if I'm working in the garden, just I try to disappear. The self, the myself, the my perspective, the my view. I try to disappear and do whatever I'm doing, and it works many times. Like if I'm a form of meditation. So my comment is like that. It's like sometimes it's not about how to get there, but realizing that we are there. So instead of become to meditate to reach nirvana, to become a Buddha, to realize that the Buddha is already here, the Buddha is already inside. And so if we can turn this comment in a question, and people give their own ideas about this will be nice.
Well, thank you, Roberto. I don't really have anything to say. Do you, Ellen?
Well, I appreciated your comment, and I think you would resonate well with some of the material that Jay was presenting and how he presented it, because, you know, I think one of the biggest learnings for me is that it's not that we are aiming to get rid of our biases, not that we're aiming to get rid of our self and its flaws, but to avoid the trap of not realizing that we have the biases, you know. And there's this analogy in the teaching about a magician that turns a bunch of sticks into an elephant, you know, and what's the elephant and what are the sticks? And I mean, the takeaway for me was it's all kind of a magic show, and we forget that we're in the magic show. And if we just would get that we're in the magic show, then we stop like sticking our foot in our mouth so often and doing a bunch of other things that we do. So I think your analogy of already being in Chicago, you know, is kind of, that's what it reminded me of is, yeah, if we could get that we're part of the whole thing, the whole magic show, and that nothing is really as solid. There's not like we're either in Seattle or we're in New York or we're in Chicago. You know, it's not that solid. So I appreciated your comment.
Matthew, you had a question?
Thank you, Susan. I do. My question is for Conor. I got a little distracted thinking on my own when you were talking about the difference between the mind only or Yogacara school and the Madhyamaka school. So I think I understand kind of this basic premise of the mind only school, and that the mind being the problem, and how that magic show is kind of created by our belief system, and what we project. How does the more objective Madhyamaka relate to that? Like, what would you say the main difference in regard to perceiving reality is?
So, I mean, you got to understand that my understanding is that you get to the same place ultimately, right? It's just where you sort of start. So both schools are going to look at what is mind. Both schools are going to look at what's external to mind. It's just how you start and how you start your analysis. So it's not necessarily that there's a huge difference. It's just what your position is to begin with. And I'm going to use an analogy here that is a little ridiculous. But you know the story of the 5 brothers who are wandering around in the forest and they come across an elephant. And they don't know what an elephant is. So, you know, each one of them sort of grabs a bit of an elephant and they're like, oh, it's big and round and has these little sort of chunky things on it. And someone's got the tail and says, oh, no, it's thin and it's fuzzy at the end. Someone's got the trunk and it's flexible and it you know, huffs out wind. And so they're each sort of describing their experience of this creature. And they each get some different experience of this creature. And I'm going to say that's sort of like Yogacara. But then I'm going to add in this 6th brother who says, well, I'm just going to ask the damn thing what it is. Hey, what are you? And, you know, elephant doesn't know what a mirror is, doesn't have a mirror because they're in the middle of the forest. So it just starts saying, well, I'm not like that thing because that's a tree. I'm not like that thing because that's a this. And just starts, you know, explaining, well, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this, I'm not that. Because that's the object talking. But all these other things are like our little minds, you know, trying to figure out what's out here. And then here's the object talking to us, and that's Madhyamaka. So it's a little bit of a weird analogy of, you know, what is talking back to us and what are we experiencing? What are we sort of asking of our mind? What's there? So Yogacara is sort of saying, what's there? What are we imposing on what's there? Versus Madhyamaka, which is saying, hey, what are you? That's my understanding. And I could be a little off on that. And that could be a really basic sort of, Wikipedia, encyclopedia, dictionary level definition. But that's why I'm rereading, right? That's why I'm going back, because there is a lot of fine distinctions and beautiful arguments that are made here. And I am just a beginner, right? I mean, that's the beauty of this, is that I don't have to know it all. And I can go back, and that's
one thing that we have
a really big book.
Yeah.
So
one thing we haven't mentioned is that they converge, they meet, they really originate. I don't know if that's right. At dependent arising. I mean, dependent arising is the core of both of them. And it's how you look at dependent arising. Do you look at dependent arising from the side of the object and all of the dependencies and causes and conditions that put that object together? Or do you look at dependent arising from what does my mind do to understand that? So it's looking at dependent arising from two different perspectives, but is all about still dependent arising being at the core. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that, but let's hear from Jim and Ellen, or anybody else, actually.
I don't have anything to add. Jim?
It's tempting. It's tempting to go deeper into the teaching, but I'm a little wary of doing that. But that, I would encourage, you don't have to listen to I don't think the 30 hours. I would say, you could listen to maybe, the first 2 days, and you would pretty much get a lot of the gist. The initial sutra that was, he had 3 subjects of study during this workshop, and then the initial subject was the teaching of sorry for the long name, Samdi Nirmochana Sutra, on the 3 natures of reality, and or 3 natures of existence, and that teaching probably goes on for the first 2 days or so, and I think it's well worth listening to, maybe those first 2 days to get the right. That's the Samdi Nirmochana Sutra.
And what's in the translation is? John
Powers.
No. The in English, the sutra.
Oh, in English it means it's very interesting. It means the explanation of the intent, and a lot of the sutra is framed in this kind of wonderful format where these different bodhisattvas go to the Buddha, and they said, well, when you were teaching this dependent origination, Buddha, what were you really thinking there? So it's quite fun in a way, that they're sort of really trying to get, like, what was the intent there? What were you really trying to convey? Was it, and maybe they're trying to, like, draw out more from the Buddha. Could you go a little deeper into that? and of course he does. He does go deeper into that, and that's where you get this 3 nature theory, and that is really talking about the structure of our everyday consciousness and the structure of liberated consciousness. So it's worth listening to those first couple of days, I think, without me going further into it myself.
I see in Elizabeth's picture that her eyes are blinking now, so I think she's back.
I'm unfrozen. I have only read, or I've only watched 4 episodes of the YouTube video, but I found myself actually really beginning to understand consciousness and emptiness, and through my dahlias. I planted some dahlias for Mother's Day for my mother, and they were little tubers and they have little eyes. So I put them in the ground, and I just didn't think about it. I knew they were going to grow, but I was really, I was really on top of them because I really wanted them to grow. I like to see stuff happen. And after listening to Jay talk, I walked out one day and 3 of them had grown green leaves. And I thought, oh my God, this is an imputation. This is emptiness. This is a deception. This is so exciting. And then I started to look at myself my interior self, my subject, and say, okay, so what's going on in me? What's going on in the Yogacara view of this? Well, I have anticipation, excitement. Psychologically, I'm primed for growth. I'm thinking about a blossom. So there's 2, I was able to kind of experience an imputation I've never understood, but suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, it's like the magic show. It's exciting and practical. And when I go out in the morning every day, I am like shocked at my imputation, as opposed to my examination and realization of dependent origination and the emptiness of my dahlias. So Jay's speech was very inspiring.
Thank you. I'm glad you got unfrozen to share that with us.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So is there anything else, or could move on to closing prayers?
Well, thanks all for your interest in this today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to go ahead and show prayers unless there's anything else.
Due to the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all-powerful Chenrezig, Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. May the teachings of the Buddha flourish, and may the upholders of the teachings remain forever. May all migrators achieve happiness, and may they fulfill all their temporary and ultimate goals. Losang, magical display of the deep awareness of all the victorious ones, merciful giver of a stream of profound and vast instructions to the fortunate migrators, please remain always unperishing, unchanging, unfading. Avalokiteshvara, great treasure of objectionless compassion, Manjur Shri, master of flawless wisdom, Vajrapani, destroyer of the entire host of Maras, Sankapa, crown jewel of the snowy land sages. Losang Drapa, I make request at your holy feet. verses that save Sakya from sickness, a prayer for pacifying the fear of disease. May all the diseases that disturb the minds of sentient beings and which result from karma and temporary conditions, such as the harms of spirits, illness, and the elements, never occur throughout the realms of this world. May whatever sufferings arise due to life-threatening diseases, which, like a butcher leading an animal to slaughter, separate the body from the mind in a mere instant, never occur throughout the realms of this world. May all embodied beings remain unharmed by acute, chronic, and infectious diseases, the mere names of which can inspire the terror, the same terror as would be felt in the jaws of Yama, Lord of Death. May the 80,000 classes of harmful obstructors, the 360 evil spirits that harm without warning, and the 424 types of disease and so forth never cause harm to any embodied being. May whatever sufferings arise due to the disturbances in the four elements, depriving the body and mind of every pleasure, be totally pacified, and may the body and mind have radiance and power and be endowed with long life, good health, and well-being. By the compassion of the gurus and the three jewels, the power of the dakinis, Dharma protectors, and guardians, and by the strength of the infallibility of karma and its results, may these many dedications and prayers be fulfilled as soon as they are made.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Elizabeth.
everyone.
Thanks. Do we have any announcements?
You might say something about Sakadawa.
Oh, right. Sagadawa, tomorrow night, 7. Usual time is for Buddha Dharma study program. It will be combined with something for Sagadawa. So please come. Everyone's welcome.
For those of you who are maybe unclear, Sakadawa is the period of time during which we celebrate the Buddha's death, the Buddha's enlightenment, and the Buddha passing into parinirvana. So it's sort of this big celebration, this very important time on the Tibetan calendar.
Thanks for joining us, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
It's great to have you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jim. It was great.
Thanks for organizing, Connor.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming and showing up.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.
7 p.m. Dell.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Roberto.
Thanks. Bye.